Hello, everyone. My name is Brett Provenzano, Superintendent of the Fairport Central School District, and I am sitting here with Assistant Superintendent for Business and Operations, Mr. Jeremy Nardone. Welcome to Under the Hood of the Fairport Central School District budget, where we invest in our future-ready raters and how we meet the community's expectations of its schools. I would like to thank our Board of Education, who has high expectations for our schools, and to make sure that we're always communicating and being transparent in our programming and budgeting process. We started inviting people 2 years ago to learn about our budgeting process, and we called this Under the Hood. And again, it is a complete and thorough deep dive into the school budget process. This is not a presentation of the 26-27 school year budget. This is just a roadmap of how we arrive at the annual budget. For all budget presentations, visit fairport.org or our YouTube channel to get more information about the 26-27 budget. Again, Under the Hood is an opportunity to discuss how we build the budget. It gives us an opportunity to talk about the students we serve and important Fairport budget factors. There are certain things that we have here in Fairport that make us unique, that definitely inform our budgeting process. We're going to talk about where the money goes and what's next in our budgeting process. Every year, we start out with budget goals. If we're fortunate, the budget passes in May, and then in June, we start thinking about the next school year budget. The budget vote is just one day, but the process occurs throughout the year. In particular, Under the Hood is about keeping long-term fiscal sustainability at the forefront of the budget process with a strong focus on being transparent and fiscally responsible. We hope that you see our intentions to do that in this presentation. As I just said, the budget is a process. It is not a one-time event. You can see that we're in February, and I believe it will be tomorrow. We'll be talking about the non-instructional budget all the way through dates in March, where we're beginning to talk about the instructional budget and building the three-part budget in April, where we will have a recommendation for the Board of Education to discuss and approve a budget, or adopt a budget, by April 21st. Again, multiple opportunities to interact about our programming and our budgeting and important factors that influence our budget throughout the entire school year, as this graph or this timeline indicates. And the budget vote will be on May 19th at Joanna Perrin Middle School. Many opportunities to talk about that as we move through the budget process. When we look at our entire programming, I'm really proud that over the past several years, we've been measuring our success. We can see and view our success through school improvement initiatives, facilities planning endeavors. We've talked about the consolidation and the time change, and of course, being fiscally responsible. These are the areas that we talk about throughout the year when we have board workshops and when we have board meetings. We are reporting on measures of success.
So this presentation is about the revenue, but let's recap. When you're building the revenue budget, there's a reason for it, and it's to fund all the different expenditures that we have here at Fairport. Here's just a couple of them, especially looking at the non-instructional side, which we will talk about again tomorrow at our board meeting. So we do have transportation and all the different factors that go into transportation, from salaries and benefits to transportation in non-public and private and parochial schools, to fuel, oil, parts, replacement costs, and our favorite topic, the zero emission buses. There's also technology. Technology is a big factor of our budget. Again, staffing, there's software, there's hardware, and then there's Chromebooks that all of our students use. And then also our facilities. We are a 1.2 million square foot campus with 8 school buildings, 4 administrative buildings, and over 300 acres to mow and to take care of.
And as I said during our last presentation, it's amazing how frequently our facilities are being used. You come to our schools at any point in time, particularly in the evenings as well, during the day obviously, but in the evenings our facilities are being used all of our buildings, most notably the high school, Minerva Deland, the middle schools as well, Joanna Perrin and Martha Brown. And you even see activities occurring after school at our elementary. We're proud of the fact that our facilities are accessible. When you think about school budgets, you really don't sometimes think that we are a business and that we have operations. And we're proud to share our buildings with our entire community and, of course, our students. Our buildings, of course, serve our students. We are proud of our 419 graduates. 62 of those students had the New York State seal by literacy in 7 different languages. That's being proficient in multiple different languages, and that is recognized through that seal. 96 students received the seal of civic readiness, engaging with community members and having a specific seal unique to New York State. And 71 students graduated with honors, displaying academic excellence. Our students have 140 courses here at Fairport High School alone. It also includes 20 advanced placement classes, 110 electives, and 11 course areas. Our students get to choose from a vast array of electives, and we're proud to get our students ready for the future, interested in their future, and as they move through our schools, define themselves as individuals. We participate in AP exams, many partnerships with local universities or colleges. We have an award-winning music and art program. Very proud of the great things that are accomplished in the arts. We participate in BOCES to give students alternative paths, CTE programs, and our students certainly take advantage of those offerings. Did you know that Fairport High School was named to the College Board AP School Honor Roll in 2020-24? Martha Brown and JP are both schools to watch for over the past 10 years. This is a prestigious award given to less than 3% of the nation's middle schools. JP was nominated for and won the 2020-24 Rochester Community's Choice Awards for the best public school locally. And Fairport High School is proud to say that they are a national blue ribbon school, and is ranked annually as a high-performing school district by U.S. News and World Reports. So many things to celebrate. We believe that we make wise investments in our students, and they definitely take advantage of that. And it's also a community expectation that our students have opportunities, like I just mentioned, and all the great things that are occurring at the elementary level, like clubs, like the Spark Labs, and of course, the commitment to the science of reading. All investments.
So what do we look for? These are just the different revenue sources that we have. When we talk expenditures, you're going to see 3 to 4 pages of different expenses that school districts have versus instruction, non-instruction, different level support. But for the revenue, there's only a few bullets that are true to every school. So one of the biggest ones that we have here, due to our wealth ratio, is our property taxes. And when you see payments in lieu of taxes, those are also called pilots, and we're going to get to those a little bit later and drill down a little bit more on those. And there's also state aid, which makes up over 33% of our budget. And then we also receive sales tax from Monroe County redistributed back to the school districts in Monroe County, and we receive a portion of that. There's also other revenue sources. These are a lot smaller. There's tuition, there's facilities, equipment, rental usage, there's admissions, there's interest earnings, which has been very good over the past 5 years. But rates are starting to come down, but they're still very favorable, being over 3% on an investment. We also receive federal Medicaid and different federal monies. And then we also receive prior year refunds from our BOCES programs. So whatever we pay BOCES that we don't necessarily use, a portion of that money gets reallocated back to the districts in the following year. There's also different interfund transfers, and now more recently, we are seeing revenue money for the lease of Minerva Deland that will start in the 26-27 school year. And finally, you'll see there at the bottom, we do rely on fund balance and reserves to balance the budget. So this is a different slide that looks at all those different revenue sources compiled into 5 different sections. The big one being the property taxes and the pilots, making up about 55% of the budget. State aid makes up around 33% of the budget. Reliance on those fund balance and reserves is about 6% of the budget. Sales tax from Monroe County is coming in at 4%. And then you have other revenues, all those additional revenues that I mentioned before, the admissions, the miscellaneous revenues, the prior year refunds on the BOCES, and interfund transfers makes up 1 cent to 1.5 cents. And this is what breaks up our budget and how we can fund different programming. And just so you know, this is the 25-26 budget because we are not finished creating the 26-27 budget. So understanding the tax cap formula, being that property taxes is 55% of our budget along with pilots, understanding the tax cap formula is very important. There's a few slides here. I'm not going to go through everything verbatim, but it's important to know and just hit some of the high level areas. Back in January of 2012 is when the tax cap went into effect. Before that, districts were able to go out at whatever tax increase they thought sustainable for the community, and there was no override on the tax cap and stuff that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But when the governor came out with this, they stated that it's a 2% tax cap. So a lot of community members think if you go out above 2%, you're overriding the tax cap and going against what the governor said, and that is not true. So again, you'll see in that middle bullet there, due to this language, the constituents, the taxpayers have the misconceptions that each school district's tax cap is at exactly 2%. Many factors go into this. The 2% is just one factor, being the rate of inflation, but there's many different factors. There's pilots, there's torts, there's increases in the retirement systems, and there's also capital and pilot exclusions that we're going to get into. So those pilots, those payment in lieu of taxes, these are agreements made between the school or between the county and the company that comes into Fairport or into the county itself. So what it is the county wants these businesses to come to the area because it brings infrastructure and it brings jobs, excuse me. So because of that, they get a tax incentive to bring their business here. Usually these pilot agreements are 10 years and they are recorded separately from the property taxes, and these agreements are not included on the assessment rolls. There's the rate of inflation, which again is at 2%, and that is determined every year in January. And then there's also the tax-based growth factor, which is actual physical changes to the taxable property, such as construction of new homes, stores, offices, and this does not include changes in the assessed value or the revaluation that is set to happen here in September. There's also debt exclusion, so we receive roughly 73.4% of our money back on our building aid, and we receive roughly 69.8% back on our transportation aid. So these debt exclusions look at your revenue compared to your expense. And if you have more expense than you do revenue, you're going to have an exclusion that you can offset in your tax cap formula. There's also the pension increases. We have 2 retirement systems. We have the employer's retirement system for our non-certificated staff, and then we also have the TRS, or the teacher's retirement system, for all our certificated staff, which is our teachers and our administrators. And if any of those systems increase by more than 2% in a given year, the district is allowed an exclusion for those. In 26-27, none of these retirement systems are increasing by more than 2%. And there's also tort exclusions, which again, these are judgments or claims against the districts, and they can only be covered by an exclusion if they are more than 5% of the total prior year's tax levy.
So just to emphasize, the property taxes, tax levy, and pilots, that's about 55% of our budget, and the money that we receive from state aid, which we are continually advocating for more foundation aid, that's the majority of where we get our revenues from, is 33%.
Yes. And then there's also carryover here. I'm not going to get into this slide because Fairport does not have carryover. In essence, if you have more debt expense than you do debt aid, you will not be eligible for the carryover, and that is where we stand. If the district chooses to override the tax cap formula, so at the end of that formula, we'll come up with a number. If we decide to go out at over that number, we will require a supermajority to pass the vote, which is 60% or more. If we go out at the tax cap or below, we only need the simple majority, which is 50% plus 1 vote. So budgeting for state aid, as Mr. Provenzano just said, foundation aid is the biggest source of revenue we have for state aid. This was enacted in 2007, 2008. It is the largest unrestricted aid category that school districts have across the board. And it is also based on a complex New York State formula that has actually been changing and has changed and been fully implemented for the past 2 years. In addition to the foundation aid, there's a lot of expense-driven aids, which you'll see below. There's public and private access cost aid, which is based on our special education enrollment. There's also transportation aid. Eligible transportation expenses receive aid. There's also BOCES aid for eligible BOCES expenditures, and then building aid on our capital projects. So whenever we go out for a capital project, we do receive anywhere between 70 and 75 cents back on the dollar for every dollar that we spend in the form of building aid. And then the smallest one there is your instructional material aids, which includes software, hardware, textbooks, and library materials. This is actually a per pupil amount given by the state, so it does change with our enrollment, but it is such a small portion of our state aid that we don't really feel it when it does decrease due to the enrollment. So how do we project our revenues? So a lot of times when we project the revenues, we do look at past trends, but also it's about our tax cap formula and what is going on at the state in terms of the foundation aid. Between those two things, remember, property taxes and state aid makes up about 88% of our budget. And a large portion of that state aid is the foundation aid, which is in the hands of the governor every year. This graph will show the history of our state aid going all the way back to 2006-2007 school year, and it ends at the end of the 23-24 school year because we're still compiling all the information from the prior fiscal year. You'll see one of the biggest bars is the blue bar, which is our property taxes, again, looking at about 55% of the budget. There's also the orange bar, which is those pilots that we were talking about, those other tax agreements. The non-property taxes in the green is your sales tax. And then the other big bar that I'm going to point to you is the gray bar, which is the state aid. And again, a large portion of that state aid is foundation aid, and we're going to break those up as we get through the presentation. This is comparing our actual revenue to our budgeted revenue. So something that we want when we look at our budget, when we look at our revenue from year to year, we have to put a budget. And a budget is an estimated guess based on prior years. So when we do that, we don't know 100% what's going to happen. We don't know how interest rates are going to look, and we don't know different factors that we could enter into during the year to gain the district a little bit more revenue. So you'll see I'm going to point your attention to the 24 slide, which looks at the biggest fluctuation. You're going to see a 5.91% increase. Again, throughout COVID, interest rates have skyrocketed. The district does a great job investing our money into CDs, treasury bills, money market accounts. So actually, interest revenue came in well over budget those years. The problem is you can't rely on that, and you can't bump your interest revenue budget up because when those rates fall, you're eventually going to have to cut into that, and that's at no fault of the district. That's current market rates. So in those years, we were bringing in over $3 million more in interest than what was budgeted, and that money went strategically to fund future capital projects.
As you look and consider the various streams that combine to create the district's yearly revenue, what are your thoughts on the proportions of those revenue streams to the whole? I think for our viewers who are interested in these components, that's an interesting essential question to consider. What are your thoughts on the proportions of those revenue streams to the whole?
So where does the money come from? So again, looking at our taxes and our budget increases, these are not always going to increase the same, and a lot of that is related to the debt and different capital projects that we have. So you'll see a 5-year average of the school budget increase, which is at 4.12%. The 5-year average of the tax levy increase, which is the new money that the district is receiving, is 2.59%. And again, think about that compared to the rate of inflation. Rate of inflation on every year is well over 4%, and the district's revenue source, one of the main revenue sources, is only going up 2.59%. And then the tax rate is the rate in which you see on your tax bill how much that is going up on a 5-year average, which is 2.15%. So again, they don't always go hand in hand, and a lot of times it is based on different factors such as your debt, coming off the books, going onto the books, when you start capital projects compared to when you end it. That really is what drives the school district budget in total, and then the tax levy and the tax rate kind of stay behind that. With that said, just know that the town of Perrington is looking to go out at a full revaluation in the current school year. So what that's going to do is it is going to drop the tax rate because assessed value is going up on average roughly 50 to 55% amongst the entire town. So now let's put that into play. So this is that complex formula that we talked about earlier on in the presentation. You always start with your prior year tax levy, which is the 87.7 million. And again, I just wanted to point out, this is the 25-26 tax levy because not all the information is in to complete the 26-27 tax levy that is due to the state by March 1st. You multiply that by that tax base growth factor for the town of Perrington, which was 1.0046. And then you add in your current year pilots, you subtract out your current year capital and court orders, those different adjustments that we talked about. And then you get to that allowable levy growth factor. And that's really what the governor was stating when they said it's a 2% tax increase or 2% tax cap. It's the lesser of 2% or CPI, whichever is less. So if the CPI, which is the rate of inflation, came in under 2%, that number would only be able to be multiplied by that number that is less than 2%. So once you factor in everything and then you look at your pilots in the upcoming year, you look at your capital debt and your pension exclusions for the upcoming school year, you get to that new tax levy, which is that 90.3 million, and then you look at that as a percentage increase, which is 2.98%, which is what the district went out at last year. So again, it wasn't a 2% tax cap. 2% is one factor, but really it looks at those capital exclusions from one year to another and your pilot increases or decreases from one year to another. Looking at the tax levy per student, this is all the different schools in Monroe County, or at least the most of them that subscribe to the system that we use to check our data. We like to compare ourselves to the East Side school districts that are relative in size. The only reason is because once you get out to certain districts, they have different factors that go into their foundation aid and all that different state aid that they receive that we talked about earlier. Again, as I stated, we receive 55% of our budget is due to the property taxes, and state aid is 33%. When you look at other districts, they might be the reverse of that. And again, it depends on many different factors, the wealth ratio of the district, the number of students that they have, and the different programs that they offer. So looking at Fairport, I would say that we're right in the middle, which is our tax levy per student, which looks at our tax levy compared to our overall budget as a per pupil. So if you look at the other districts that we compare ourselves to, you'll see Penfield is a little lower, you see Pittsford is a little higher, Rush Henrietta is almost at the same size as we are. And then you have, again, those outlier school districts that are Hilton, Spencerport, Brockport, Churchville. Those are different factors. They don't have certain businesses that we have, and they don't have certain infrastructure and different tax bases that we have here at Fairport. So looking at that, I'm proud to say that we're right in the middle for our tax levy per student. And now looking at our full value tax rates, you'll probably see on your tax bill last year that the taxes were right around $24.95 per parcel, which you'll probably say that seems pretty high, especially other districts are around $14 to $16 per thousand. The reason is because the equalization rate last year was at 62%. So when you factor that in, that means that homes are being taxed on a value that's 60% of the market value of the home. So in order to collect the full value and the full tax levy, the district has to increase the tax rate. So when the assessed value goes to 100%, which is scheduled to happen here in September of 2026, that tax rate will drop, and that tax rate would have been $15.47 as of the 24-25 school year, and it would have been even less here in the 25-26 school year. So once those reassessments happen, the taxes are going to be spread out a little evenly per parcel, and the district's tax rate is going to go down about $9 to $10 per thousand. So budgeting for state aid. So now looking at the other side of the revenue, which is our state aid, a lot of it focuses in on foundation aid. For that, we look at the governor's budget proposal that came out here at the end of January, which talks about the different levels of increases that every school gets. And again, this is an estimate. The final budget will come out in April, hopefully April if it's on time. Sometimes it could be early May. We are kind of held hostage here by the governor. But at the end of the day, right now they are calling for a 1% increase minimum to all districts, and Fairport does fall into that 1% due minimum increase, which is only $326,000 more of additional foundation aid.
And that would be because of our flat enrollment, the number of special needs and special, special needs and our E&L population. It's all based upon that formula. So with the district that we are, with declining enrollment or the leveling off of enrollment, that's why we're not seeing the larger increases that some of the other districts are receiving.
Absolutely. All expense-driven aids are still at their local levels per the governor, so no changes there to those transportation, building aids, or BOCES aids. And also, the governor is proposing a significant expansion of the pre-kindergarten, increasing the aid to $10,000 per pupil, which right now Fairport sits at $5,233 per pupil, and on our federal grants we get about $5,400 per pupil. So this would be a significant increase for our pre-kindergartners. That actually some of that money is funded through the general fund budget, so we'd be able to move that and get that funded 100% by the state.
So that would be a positive benefit to the district if the $10,000 per student comes through for UPK.
Absolutely. And again, right now it's a proposal. It is an election year, so again, we want to do everything we can to make ourselves look good. But at the end of the day, who knows what's going to happen? We're going to have to wait till April to see if that's going to be included in the governor's final budget. So looking at some history, again, we like to go back just to show you all the different trends in the revenue. Again, the gray bar, and this is just the state aid side. So this is that 33% of the budget that we were talking about. The gray bar is our basic formula aid, which does include our foundation aid, and it does include some of those expense-driven aids that we talked about earlier outside of BOCES. We do receive lottery aid from the state as well, which is exactly what it seems like it says. It is aid based on the lottery system, and the school districts do receive a portion back for that. We do receive BOCES aid on eligible BOCES expenditures, and then all those different other aids that we talked about that you're probably not even going to see on the screen because it's just a smaller amount. They do play a role, and they help us with programming, but they are not a big factor of the budget. Looking at the foundation aid, which was part of that gray bar that we just looked at, over the past 5 to 6 years, so you can see the increase there. Again, about 3 years ago, the foundation aid formula was fully funded, and that's where you see that big increase from $27.4 million in 2023 to $32 million in 2024. Since then, because the formula has been fully funded, and as Mr. Provenzano said, there's not major changes in our enrollment, that number is almost stayed flat, or it has been receiving the due minimum increases year over year. This is our regional state aid comparison compared to the district. Again, Fairport is one of the bigger schools on the east side. So you can see Webster there and Rush Henrietta, who are a little bit bigger or roughly the same size, especially with Henrietta. They receive a little bit more state aid than we do, and a lot of that is based on the foundation aid, which is based on their wealth factor in their district, and also, again, that student enrollment. So if you have more students, of course, you're going to receive more aid in foundation aid there. So Fairport is one of the highest, but again, that is because we have a larger enrollment than some of the other schools, namely Penfield and Brighton and Victor. Looking at our special aid fund revenue, which is our federal dollars that we receive every year, I'm going to point your attention to the left side of the graph, which is 2015 through 2021. Our federal aid was flat. Those are the basic grants that every school district receives. We receive Section 611 and 619 grants for our special education students, and then we also receive title grants, which is based on our ELL population and also based on our wealth factor as well. So those grants were stable for the longest time, and then in 2022, what happened? COVID happened. At that time, all the districts in the state received different federal dollars, whether it be CRISA or ARPA funds that the school district utilized and increased our expenditures. So for that, we actually received more federal aid for those 3 years.
One thing I just want to stress, in addition to that foundation aid formula, the factors, definitely in the enrollment piece, but we are considered by the state a wealthy district.
Absolutely.
So that impacts the foundation aid, and you'll see that 1% um, per year increase is influenced by wealth ratios and student enrollment.
Absolutely. And what you're going to see in the future here is this slide is going to eventually level back off because those federal grants are now gone. So the ARP and CRISM money went away. So you're going to see this federal aid return to its normal levels, except for the one caveat to that is our school lunch federal aid, because again, the governor did go to a fully funded school lunch program where we do not have to pay. We receive federal aid. You will see a little bit of an uptick, but it will not be what you've seen there in 2022 through 2024.
So as we consider the trend of foundation aid funding allocated to Fairport over the past several years, do any trends surprise you? Also, what do you notice about the categorical makeup of the state aid the district receives and projects? And finally, what do you notice about the special aid fund revenue and the potential future implications?
So with that, we always want to be transparent in our budget process. So the district does have reserves that are set aside for specific purposes. So reserve funds are actually allowed to be kept by the New York State Comptroller as long as they are at certain levels that is dictated either by the board or maximum funding levels that is actually dictated by the community and the voting. And let's get into some of those reserves now. So we have different capital reserves. When you hear capital reserves, this is the money that goes back to the taxpayers in the term of community investment. So we do have our capital project reserve for 2022 that you will see the balance as of June 30th of 25, just over 21.7 million. Please note that 15 million of that is already earmarked for the K-8 project that was voted on back in September of 2025. So 15 million will be moved out of that reserve at the end of the 25-26 fiscal year, and the remaining 6.1 will be for future capital projects. The district also has a technology reserve to help bolster its technology. Also, whenever you buy technology, you have to replace technology. Think about that as your home. You have fridges now that are considered technology because of how they're built. You have TVs that need replacing. Now look at that as a scale from a school district. We have Chromebooks that all our district students use that have a useful life. Those have to be replaced. Our hardware and software have to be re-upped every year. In addition to that, we also have our capital bus reserves. So we still have our capital bus reserve from 2002. That will be closed out at the end of next school year, using up that $88,000 you're going to see on the ballot here come May of 2026. And then we also have $727,000 remaining in our bus capital reserve 2024. A large portion of that goes to replacement buses. We do like to replace between 8 and 11 buses every year, depending on if they're big buses, if they're small buses. But also please note that we do have an electric zero emission bus mandate to hit here by June of 2027. So we need to make sure that we have money set aside to actually buy those electric buses. And just so you know, the cost of an electric bus is roughly 3 times the cost of a gas engine bus.
So yes, that is true relative to the mandate. However, there's been incredible advocacy by our Board of Education and surrounding districts on the feasibility of actually maintaining and making it to that 2027 marker that you said that we need to be completely EV and begin purchasing EV buses. So we were just with the governor's office this past weekend, and they're aware that some districts, even as of last week, there was a neighboring district that the vote actually went down to purchase EV infrastructure and buses. So I believe and I'm hopeful that that will change.
Absolutely.
Relative to the capital project reserve, about 8 years ago, we had a mandate from the public. We had over 110 members of staff, students, and community members, Board of Education members as well, said on the District Advisory Council, and one of the main outputs of that multidisciplinary committee was to invest in our facilities. And that's why over the past several years, you've seen votes and referendums and projects because we had a mandate. And as we continue to move into the future, we're going to be reassessing to make sure that this is still the community's hopes and aspirations for its schools. Because again, our schools are frequently used, and we want to make sure that our schools are inviting and safe and meeting expectations and beyond. So that's why over the past several years, you have seen an uptick in the capital reserve and in the usage of the capital reserve, which again requires voter authorization. So please stay tuned for more information about reassessing our capital needs as a district.
Absolutely. There are also other restricted reserves that the school district has. So when we say restricted, they're restricted for a specific purpose, and they can only be used on that purpose. So we do have a repair reserve. If something goes wrong and we need to repair something or fix something last minute and the money is not in there in the budget, we have some money set aside to do that. There's the employee benefit accrued liability reserve, which pays for future benefits that the district gives for staff members, which all ties to contracts and negotiations. There's a tax certiorari reserve, which looks at your tax claims. So again, especially with the reassessment that's going to happen, it's good to have some money set aside in those reserves for the challenged assessments. We also have some money set aside in a liability reserve, which is for anything that can happen to a school, whether it's a roof blowing off in the middle of the night or a boiler going down or something that we need, or insurances. And again, insurances are covered in that later reserve. The insurances have been increasing, just like you're seeing at your home. So if we need more money and we can't set aside that through our general fund budget, we can go back and dip into the reserves to use that because it is an expense that we see every year. Board authorized reserves. These are board authorized, and they are able to be kept at a certain level that is dictated by the Board of Education. You'll see the different amounts there. Again, we do have the two retirement systems that we subscribe to. So we have the employees' retirement system and the teachers' retirement system.
So really quick, the employee retirement system are non-certificated employees. Those are your essential workers. We are required to pay into their system, and this here allows us to access funds if we need them in the future. And the same thing for our teacher retirement system. That's your certificated employees, your teachers, and your administrators. Now, in total, we have approximately just over 1,000 employees. And again, people forget sometimes that we are a real live business with real live operating costs, and this helps us gladly meet our commitment to those employees.
Absolutely. And then you'll also see an unemployment and a workers' compensation reserve. Again, the district does have unemployment and workers' compensation costs year over year, and this will go to fund any the major changes that you see there. Again, this was something that was very important during COVID to have because people were filing for unemployment and workers' compensation. Anything can happen. We are a school. We are a people business. Things happen, so it's always good to have money set aside for that.
And this concludes our revenues session. We will make sure that you have access to a link in our YouTube video to provide feedback for us to consider. And of course, if you have specific questions, there'll be access to an email or a way to communicate with district administration so we can address any questions from our expenditure or our revenue presentations. You'll see a QR code that will definitely get you to a place where you can provide more feedback to the district. It's hopefully on your screen right now. Again, we really appreciated the opportunity to talk about our non-instructional and our instructional budgets, particular the expenditures and revenue sides of the budget. We hope that you have a more in-depth perspective on the Fairport Central School District budget process.